right, that sounds good. Thank you very much, Philip. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking your lunch hour. And I've owned my business, as you will learn, for 25 years. And I think today you'll be able to walk away, hopefully, with a nugget or two that you can apply to a future business that you want to start or an existing business that you are already in right now. I definitely don't know all the answers. I still have a lot to learn, but I am always open to learning new things. So I've structured this talk. So the first component, we're going to kind of go as to why to start a business, a little bit about me as we go throughout this talk. And then we're going to kind of conclude with people and growth, right? So interesting, maintaining the business is the hardest thing I've ever done. Not starting the business, that part seemed very easy. And I remember way back in 1994, when a business owner told me, hey, the hardest thing you're ever going to learn or deal with in owning your business is employees. And I remember thinking to my naive self, oh, that can't be. It's going to be sales. It's going to be how to bring in work. It's going to be the operations. But he was definitely right. Employees are by far the hardest thing. Just to give you a brief background, I do have 2 college-age children. I have 3 dogs, a husband, and 2 elderly parents, and about 100 employees. And managing the business is by far the hardest component that I've dealt with. A quote I like to start with is Joe Girard. The elevator to success is out of order. There's no way to build a business or maintain a business that isn't one step at a time. There is no shortcuts. There's no easy way to do it, at least from my perspective. So some days you're gonna race up those stairs. You're gonna feel really good and strong. Other days are going to be a bit of a slog. Some days you really need to help. You need to reach out for people, and they need to encourage you. There are going to be days where you feel like you're going backwards. Like, what am I doing this for? And you have to kind of keep things in perspective as to why you're doing this in the first place. So here's my perspective. I am not someone that had the opportunity to go through the MBA program at Cal State Fullerton. I have no formal business education. I have an environmental degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and did not really take a lot of business classes. I am grateful to my parents who raised me to not incur a lot of debt, to save, to try to make good financial decisions. So that's the perspective that I am delivering this talk to you on, is that anyone can start a business, but you ultimately have to address those business aspects. And one reason I feel I've been successful, thankfully, is because I knew why I wanted to start a business. So why start a business? For me, as you're going to learn a little bit briefly about what my company and what I did, I started it because I wanted to balance land development with environmental conservation. So that was why I started the business. I knew I needed to work in order to make a living. Unfortunately, I, like all of you, I'm sure, did not come from independently wealthy folks. So you needed to work. And I wanted to work in a capacity, not because I wanted my own hours or that sort of thing. I just knew that I wanted to make a difference. And so that's kind of where I came from as to why I started the business. I definitely did not start this business because I wanted to make a lot of money. I did it for different reasons. I am very grateful that I was able to earn a very good living, and am fortunate in a lot of respects. So I think it's important that you're always clear as to why you're actually starting the business, because that will gear a lot of those decisions that you make down the road. So a little bit about me. So I started Nature's Image 25 years ago, and what a year to have our 20th anniversary during COVID. It's been a bit of a challenge, to say the least. But Nature's Image is a landscape contractor, and we do what's called native habitat restoration. So we work specifically for public and private entities. We do not do residential mow and blow. I do not know the name of your plant that's in front of your house. I strictly know native habitats. So I know all the native trees and shrubs in our California area. So that's what Nature's Image does. Our focus is solely on that one thing, healing our natural environment. I recently started a second business, Scrappy Resources, which is an environmental consulting firm, which goes hand in hand with what Nature's Image does. So I think it's important to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So since nobody really knows what native habitat restoration is, I am just going to briefly show you some pictures of what we do. So this is out at Chino State Park, and we are reestablishing coastal sage scrub. All those yellow flowers actually are invasive species, and invasive species are effectively not native. And so we take those out. So that's the type of work that we do. Next, here's a project that we were reestablishing a riparian habitat. When you reestablish a habitat, you have 5 years to make that habitat self-sustaining, which means you will not have any interference of man. No irrigation, no pesticides, no chemicals, nothing. So basically it now becomes a wildlife natural corridor. So that's the work that we do. So I just wanted you to understand that, because everything that I talk about as it relates to growth and people is in relationship to the company that I have, right? And I just wanted you to understand that perspective. Creek restoration. This is a creek that we restored to a natural environment. It now cleans water. It helps with flooding. It is a wildlife corridor, and I'm sure most of you would rather walk along the picture with native plants versus a concrete jungle. So there's a lot of benefits to the work that we do. How I started the company. So my husband and I started it in 1995. And these days, one of the key things that you want to have is innovation, right? What's separating you from your competition, right? What makes you different? So what we did was we brought a piece of equipment, and having one piece of equipment allowed us to be different than everybody else, because this was a unique piece of equipment. No one else had it. And we were able to purchase it with savings. So having minimal debt or no debt is critical. All right, one of the key things that I attribute my success in Nature's Image is we have always been very scrappy and resourceful, right? And this kind of follows the fake it till you make it scenario. And I just wanted to kind of share a story with you on how we developed Nature's Image logo. So our first project, we are Nature's Image. We show up on a job site with this piece of equipment, and we're going to do this seed imprinting, which I will refer to in a minute. This type of work, right, is new. And of course, we just started the company. We didn't have business cards. This was in 95. Vistaprint wasn't available. You couldn't just race home and print out some business cards. So I told everyone that showed up, hey, they all wanted our card. Hey, we really want to be able to do this work on our next mitigation project. How can we get in touch with you? And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot the business cards, right? I forgot them. So let me bring those to you tomorrow. You give me yours and I'll bring you mine tomorrow. So you work all day and then you go home and you're like, okay, so how do I make a business card? Well, back then I knew I had manila folders at my little office. And I thought, okay, I think clip art, Microsoft back then had some clip art. And so I created our logo that night, and that's what it looked like. I know it looks a little dated, but that was our first logo. I figured I'll take a big tree and then I'll shrink it down and make a little tree and a smaller one, and that'll be showing the growth of nature. And that's what we do, right? So the next day I appeared with these business cards, which I printed off manila folder paper and then hand cut with an X-Acto knife. And I think one of the key things is, I'm embarrassed to say this logo stayed with us for almost 10 years. However, it was one of those things where I got it done and it stuck with us and it didn't cost anything. I didn't pay a lot of money for a logo. And in our business, that was okay. In the type of business you're launching, a logo could be critical for your success. So understanding where you spend your money and your resources on your business is very important. So another thing I'd like to share with you is this seed imprinting. Okay, this is what it is, and I'm not going to get into the detail of that necessarily. It's just a way to seed large-scale projects with native habitats. And we created and developed what was called a slope imprinter because it didn't exist, and we're the only ones today that have one. And as you can see, the photo in the center was how we designed it on the back of a napkin in the middle of a diner in the Mojave Desert. So using your, things just don't have to be fancy in order to be successful. And it's kind of funny, it was dated 12/22/95 and it says get patent ASAP. Well, we didn't have any money for a patent, so we never did that. But that imprinter allowed us to differentiate and be able to develop more of a stronger clientele. And the reason I wanted to share that story with you is because that is important as you develop your clients. You recognize how you can stand out and be different. A big thing on managing a small business is your resources. So I believe our resources are very finite. We didn't have much. We started with very little. And how I kind of always looked at things from a construction aspect was, what equipment can I not rent, or what equipment does nobody else have that does our type of work? And so I would only purchase equipment. Here's some of those pieces of equipment, but that nobody else had. And I was able to find them used, and I was able to work to drive down the loans that I would need on that. So managing your resources in developing your business is really critical. And it's easy to lose sight of wanting to spend a lot of money on something that may not be able to give you return. These units, I was able to make money on our job sites. Therefore, I got return into the company, and then I could buy the next piece. So managing those resources. Another way that I thought managing our resources was advantageous is in my line of work, I needed to have a building. Now, understanding we are in COVID, I have the bulk of my administrative staff are working remotely. However, we still have people at our office. I still have people that need to come in and get supplies, workmen that need to deliver and pick up things. So I knew I needed a building way back when. And in 2010, I was able to purchase a building. And the reason I was able to justify this building that we purchased is that I still had to pay that rent someplace else. Now I'm paying that rent into the company. And that is, those types of long-term strategic thinking is where you want to think about how you're doing things. So from another perspective, I think all of us, regardless if you have, people talk about ADD or ADHD, We all get attracted to shiny objects, right? And in preparing for this talk, I even Googled shiny objects just to get a picture. And there's a whole syndrome on it, which I didn't even realize. If you're only in your business for making money, I think there's some big downfalls to that. And the first one I thought is that you're going to constantly be distracted by the next shiny thing. It's very important, I think, that you look at your business and stay in your lane of what you want to offer, as either if it's a service or if it's a widget or some sort of object. You want to be the best you can in that area. If you get too thin and spread out and are looking only for the next big thing, you're going to lose out on future opportunities. You're going to make decisions that are very short term. And if you want to stay in business for a long time, you got to make long-term decisions. And so I think staying focused on that, and we're going to talk through some strategies on how to do that in a little bit. It's quite important to do that. Growing strategically, you will make it. You're going to have to put the work in, but it's really important not to get too distracted with shiny things that might look too good to be true. So money. Money managing a business, I think I go by the old adage, and right, cash is king. So here's a picture of our first company truck with the little logo I developed that night. And the reason that truck is our first company truck is because we already owned it. So we were able to just put on the logo and bam, we had our first company truck. So managing your money, I think, is obviously vital. So you want to make sure you're not going into debt early on. Now, some companies, you may have outside money or investors. You have to make sure that you're making really good decisions on where that money is going, because once it's gone, it's gone. Secondarily, don't get sold on too many things. There's going to be a lot of vendors, a lot of people are going to be knocking at your door saying, I've got the next big X that'll solve all your problems. And most likely you're going to be able to either do that yourself or pay them a less dollar amount to be able to take that off your plate. But that becomes a timing issue as you grow your business. And one thing I also learned with people, don't share all of your financial information early on to employees. So that's something they don't completely understand, because you may have an employee that starts working for you and you've just gotten a huge sum of cash or profit from a project that you did a year ago. And it's sitting in your bank account and they think, wow, this company's rich. And they may make decisions, and this is only with smaller companies, right? They may make decisions thinking, oh, well, I saw that cash in the account. And you have to kind of remember that in the back of your head, that they're employees. They don't understand how that money got there. And they don't understand that you probably already have that allocated for. So I always am a firm believer that cash is king, and knowing where your money's spent. So some of the best management practices I've used on growing the company and managing it and making sure we're protected is knowing where it's being spent. Some of the financial checks, CPA years ago, be the only one that gets the email on the bank statements. I know of 3 other business owners that years ago did not get their bank statements, and their CFO or their bookkeeper or whatever was writing checks off their bank account and they didn't know about it. I'm the first one that gets them, I review them, and then I upload them for my finance director to reconcile the accounts. Be the only signatory when you first start on your checking account. Otherwise, other people who you haven't developed trust or checks and balances within your business, you want to make sure you're the only one signing checks and you know where those checks are. This one I am still doing today. There has been so much massive fraud on wiring money. So about 6 months ago, my CFO almost fell for one of these. It was my email with like one letter off, and it said, "Hey, I'm buying equipment. I need $100,000 wired to this account." And she almost fell for it. And so this is something to be the only one to manage those dollars. That way you always protect yourself. Develop a good relationship with your banker. Find out what good banks are out, business banks are out there. I got away from B of A within the first year of opening the business. I'm with a business bank, and they seem to understand me and support my needs as a business. They're not dealing with retail customers. And the last one on the money side is to, get an inexpensive software system. Those are readily available now. They can handle your payroll functions. They can handle a lot of your day-to-day operations. Understanding your business, okay? Understanding what it takes for your sales cycle and breaking that up into departments, if you will. Even if you might be the only one in your whole entire business, you need to think bigger. So for me, estimating gets our work, right? Some people call it business development. Some people call that sales. For us, we call that estimating, and that gets our work. We have our operations department, right? They're the ones that execute the work. In your case, it could be they're the ones that build the widget, a manufacturing company. And then you have to have a back office, right? Someone who's the group of staff that's supporting you. And you want to make sure that you continue to take in work. And I go back to this point, within your level of expertise. There is a component of fake it till you make it, as long as it's within your wheelhouse. You will, all right, so now we're going to transition. So employees, this is something that I struggled with the most by far throughout my entire career. Expectations of employees. Never expect an employee to care about your business the way you do, right? You're always going to be let down. However, on the same token, employees don't think like us owners, right? They don't have maybe that ability to kind of think big picture, think of all the components of what one decision can do, like how it will travel through your estimating department, your operations, your accounting admin team. However, you don't think like an employee. And so you can learn a lot from your staff if you're willing to listen. And you both need each other in order to be successful as a business. So it's important that you look at each lens, and that employees aren't bad. It's just that you have to learn how to work with them, right? You have to learn as John was talking about earlier, that the talent aspect is critical for your success, right? So as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you start by wearing every hat, right? There's a million hats that you're choosing from on a daily, weekly basis. And that can be fun. Like for me, initially, it was fun to do so many different things in a day, but then it becomes overwhelming, right? You can't continue to be the bookkeeper and then turn around and sell the projects and then come home and create a marketing tool. So you have to, at some point, be able to strategize and start separating out those tasks. So I always say, make sure that you hire for where you're weakest. And then make sure that you're hiring someone way, way smarter than you. Don't let your ego drive your success of your business. Bring in good talent if you can afford it. All right, I think most of you probably are familiar with Simon. You know, customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. So developing those employees obviously is critical for that piece. So resources for me that have been hugely successful. I have my attraction book here. I read off a Kindle, except for anything as it relates to developing my business. I buy the book and I am writing and putting in notes constantly. And Traction has been by Geo Wickman is a huge game changer for several people I know. There's a lot of great books out here. There's just 4 that for me really resonated because they talk about the organization, they talk about people, they talk about the money, and then how to make that all work together. So we're going to talk a little bit more on Traction and his pieces of how I've taken his ideology and translated it into our business. So out of the book Traction by Geo Wickman, there's something he called GWC, and obviously he has that trademarked. And the G stands for gets it. Now we are talking about employees. So before you either review an employee or you're considering hiring a candidate, does he get what the job entails? Does he understand what the job means, and is he able to do that? All right, the second, the W stands for wants it. So I have dealt with employees that are very content. They do an excellent job in their role, you know, and I think, well, why wouldn't you want to move up the ladder? And you have to want it, right? And so that wants it is a very important role. And the C stands for capacity to do it. So this GWC is critical as you are hiring people and or reviewing people. So what I did, and I've just inserted a little piece of this. So under my company, as we do our job performance reviews, we have our core values, and those are the 4 that are listed. But then we use Geo Wickman's gets it, wants it, capacity to do it, and everyone is ranked on that. And I find that that is very critical because it forces any sort of manager to really recognize, does this person really have all that it takes to do it? Another idea that I had taken, and this was from Gary Ridge. He is the CEO of WD-40. I'm sure many of you know the product is kind of like a lubricant, basically, that you use to lubricate, you know, chain on a bicycle, things like that. And he had, I heard him speak a few years back, he actually had a card, and on this card, how he developed employee engagement one way was to create a business card that had your mission. You open it up, it's got your purpose, the niche of your company. For us, I have something called a PAC pledge, or a pledge that you pledge as an employee to deliver to the organization. And then on the back, we put our core values, and everyone is rated on their core values. And so this I found was a very critical part in not only culture of your company, but also very important in engagement, because you could call people out when they weren't being professional, as an example, or they were not supporting each other. So this is a great tool that I found for employee engagement. Our next component is your standard organizational chart. So you have your organization, and it has your typical, I just pulled this offline, you know, your president, your finance people, and blah, blah, blah. Well, one thing that Gino Wickman does in Traction is he translates this into what he calls a accountability chart. So he takes that where you've got your sales manager, and now he's giving that person responsibilities, right? He's defining that in the organizational chart. So in this example, we have sales and marketing in our top box. There is something called LMA, which is the first item. LMA under Gino Wickman and Traction stands for lead, manage, and hold accountable. And then the other items are the big buckets that this person is responsible. They are responsible for sales process, customer service, selling, and it goes down, and their name is there. So what I would like to do is explain this on a little bit deeper level. So as we take our higher positions, so we have finance. And what I mean by higher level position is someone who's managing others. It may only be one person, especially if you're in a smaller business. It could be 100 people. But they have to have that LMA in front of their job because they have to lead that group, they have to manage that group, and they have to hold that group accountable, right? And this LMA is a quick, easy way to say, look, you're in a management level position. These are the fundamental things that you need to do. And if they can't do the LMA, then they're not the right person for that job. Underneath that, now you've got what they're actually responsible for, right? So in finance, they're responsible for all your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, and in this case, budgeting, reporting, HR compliance, etc. So in your business that you write up, always create this accountability chart, even if you are the only person on each one of these boxes. And once you've defined this accountability chart, you've defined what you want in finance, you've defined what you want in sales, and you defined what you want in entry-level positions, then you begin to build the name into that, okay? So an entry-level position could be a cashier. They will be in charge of customer service. You're going to identify the main buckets that they're responsible for. Then you put their name to it. And sometimes you may not have that person yet, right? So you may have a TBT, so to be determined. So a to be determined person is, as I grow the company, I may need to get 3 more cashiers, but I've already defined upfront what their responsibilities are. And then from a finance perspective, you can then decide when you will need to be able to hire those people. So in order to make an accountability chart, you have to define all of the roles within your company. So, and actually, let me go back to this point. And this is very difficult to do, especially as a startup or as a small company. Don't ever create a role around a person. The role is the role. That's the only way you'll be able to get process to your business. And then you fill it with that, a particular person. If you start creating job roles for people's nuances of their personalities, or because, you know, Joe and Jerry don't get along together and you don't want them reporting to each other, that's a cause for disaster as far as your business. So you would create, I would say at least, and Wickman out of Traction says to go through this and review this at a minimum quarterly. So you define what you're going to need. You're going to define their big buckets. You're not going to get into the nitty gritty of it all. And then you're going to apply a person's name to those roles, right? And this is an example of an accountability chart. And this accountability chart is a fundamental piece of how you drive your business. And then you can continue to make adjustments in the course of a year because you're now looking at this. And as a startup or when you're first starting your company, you'll realize, wait a minute, I do need the K consultant over here because I'm busy on sales and marketing. It allows you to look at your business from about 30,000 feet instead of at the 0-foot level or sea level, because we get so focused on running our business, we forget all these other important components. So back to employees. The things I think you need to have right out of the gate once you start to hire: a brief job description, right? You need to have, and a lot of this stuff you can pull off online now. You need basic corporate policies that you need to show up and not be drunk at work. You need to define those things, right? That has to all be clearly defined what your expectations are as an employer. Perform your annual reviews. Do it. I personally hated it. The book, though, that one of the books I recommended, this Conversational Capacity, is really good at allowing you to have difficult conversations, and it'll teach you some really good skills. Offer benefits as soon as you can. You know, people want to make a difference, but they also need to be paid. They need to have a 401k, healthcare paid for. All those components are what enriches all of our lives, right? This was a quote from Will Smith and is a critical component. If your staff is not making your life better, they're wasting your time. And I don't know one person out there that has terminated somebody or sent them off looking for other opportunities that regretted it. So make sure as you're going through looking at your employees that you analyze, are they making things better for you or are they challenging you a bit? Another thing for employees is safety and training. So these are some of the trainings that we do in-house. The things that I highlighted that are bolded, I think it's important, especially as an initial business owner, that you hold all the initial licenses. Because if you had an employee suddenly quit or had some sort of medical issue, you could be without operating. And so it's important as a business owner, in my opinion, that you hold all those licenses yourself. So I am a contractor in California, Arizona, Nevada. I'm not dependent upon anybody else for that. And that helps open doors. It doesn't mean somebody else can't have that license, especially down the road. But initially, you don't want to be held hostage potentially by something that could be out of your control. So I always think that's important. I also think trust but verify any staff that say, hey, I can do this skill set. Validate it. Make sure that they can. I think that's an important thing to do. Onboarding staff. Make sure you have a process for that. And you don't have to, remember, this can be dynamic. You're going to evolve this. Make sure you go through those policies. You go through a safety program. You may initiate the corporate culture right at the onset, but have some way of new staff to be introduced to your company and to your culture. I think is a really important way to start people off on the right foot. And it also gives them an opportunity to ask questions. So for employees, be sincere as to who you are. I'm a huge proponent of treating all staff equally, regardless if they're entry level or if they're, a C-level. It's very important to do that. This is one of the hardest things. Everyone I remember saying early on, oh, just hire slow. But when you all of a sudden got $1 million worth of work, you're like, holy crap, how am I going to get this done? So you want to hire quickly. If you can, hire slow, but more importantly, fire fast. If you see the red flags, do it. Get rid of that person. Remember, everyone that you bring to the team is supposed to be there to make everyone else's life better. If they're making it harder, that's a toxic environment for your culture. So always keep that in mind. Another element I want to remind you of for employees is what got you here won't get you there. So for example, as you start your business this year, the needs that you're going to have are going to be very different than what you will need 5 years from now, depending on how fast you're growing. If you're growing at an exponential rate, it's going to change. You're going to need a higher level employee 6 months from now. So having that ability to constantly reevaluate your business and where it's going is very important. I think I could have grown faster had I hired more capable people earlier versus it took me a while personally to get there, to hire people a lot smarter than me. So in concluding this and kind of wrapping up, I hope you kind of learned a few little tidbits along the way, but there's a lot of resources out there. Cal State Fullerton is huge. SCORE is another free opportunity to talk to other business owners. Vistage, if you have money. I was in Vistage for several years. It was pivotal to help me develop my business because it is for CEOs. None of these are networking. This isn't about driving business. It's about how to build your business. I am involved with several women-only groups, one of them being the Women's Presidents Organization and Connected Women of Influence. All of those help me make my business better. And so I hope you'll be able to reach out when you need to talk to all those people who have walked in your footsteps before. So I hope everybody enjoyed what I had to say. This is just from my perspective and the little tricks of the trade I've learned along the way. And I'm available if you guys have any questions or want to share anything.
Thank you, Michelle. This is great. I definitely took away a couple nuggets. Let's go ahead and open this up to the audience for some questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you have some questions or a comment.
Yeah, or definitely some comments. That's always helpful. Stop the share.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
I had one question, and I know Kevin had voiced it before, and that's the changing role of California state law about 1099 contractors versus employees. Are you able to discern what companies should be doing in that arena for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it my best shot. So effectively, you have to hire staff that would perform any work within your day-to-day operations. So if I need to have a field worker go out and do work on an irrigation system, that is in my field of expertise. Therefore, I would need to hire him as an employee. Now, if I need to develop a website design, I can hire a consultant or a 1099 person to develop that website because that's outside of my core business. And that has been my understanding of it. Now, part of that proposition that recently passed last week, which dealt strictly with gig workers, in that same theory, Uber drivers should be Uber employees, right? So the state of California on some level may have to address that now they're treating 1099 workers for some businesses one way and treating them differently for others. And so that's my interpretation, and that's how we have been driving our business. So if that's helpful to understand.
Yeah, Kevin, I know that you've got issues in your startup. And another factor was the notion of someone that you would hire that was doing continuous work that is kind of like they they sound like a duck, they look like a duck.
They
Uh,
quack
they-
like a duck.
They quack like a duck, but so they are an employee. So the 5 years ago, that 1099 that had a continuous relationship with the company was not an employee, and then today that same individual is.
Correct. And
We have this issue at the university as well, and so the whole notion of withholding of insurance benefits, all of that now ups the ante for that new employee. So
significantly, it's a significant expense that is a struggle for all business owners. And we definitely had to make some changes a couple of years ago as this kind of kept transitioning to where it is today. Anytime you direct somebody their business hours, you need them to work from 9 to 5 every day or to be available at a certain time. That's another trigger, right? That causes you now to be as an employee.
yeah, and the state of California also has had some thresholds on what I would call company size or number of employees, and this is very pervasive. So, as an example, California state law says that if you have 20 or more employees, you're mandated to provide training about sexual harassment, about harassment training, right? Well, actually, that's now dropping to 5. And so virtually any operation, a small company out there, is now going to be mandated to do training, which they may not have it in-house, but it's another change in our recent California work environment that's challenging the employer to manage their staff. So, Chan, you had a question?
Yes, I have a question about the employee and 1099 also. Like, if you hire a employee that you have to pay W-2 for them, you need to pay for health insurance also. Is that true? And for 1099, do you have to do also? Yeah, that is my question.
Okay, so from my understanding, you are not required to, if you offer healthcare to your employees, then you have to be consistent in what that looks like as far as paying for their premiums, right? Or paying certain percentages. My understanding, and I've had health insurance for many, many years for my staff. You do not have to pay their premium or offer the health insurance as a small business just yet. But there is a number of employees where that triggers, where you do have to have that component in there. You just have to be consistent. Now, if you have a 1099 employee, you are not required to pay anything. You just pay them a flat wage. You don't have to pay health or 401k or anything. That person that receives that 1099 is now required to pay their Medicare tax, their Social Security tax, or any other income taxes on their own. And that's what makes that easier. Now, there are a lot of, in the state of California, Cal Chamber is a very helpful organization online that addresses and stays up to date with all the changes that happen with California regulation and compliance as it relates to employees. And they also have a team of lawyers that are available to answer questions as you navigate a lot of these challenges. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, it's very helpful for me to know more about that. And I think that your presentation also helped me to learn more about how to organize my employee and how to treat them fairly and equally. Yeah, it's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, treating people equally is a huge thing. One plus that happened this year was on the harassment issue. the state of California now has a free online resource for you to have your staff get trained. Whereas before they didn't have that, and you were forced to either go to an outside source or some other method to train your employees. Now it's 100% online and it is for free. And my HR person actually used that this year to train our staff, which was helpful in that regard, since we didn't have to then pay additional money for that training. Good. Good. Any other questions I can help with?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. For all those people who attended, we are actually recording this, and we'll be sending a link out for those of you who may have came a little bit late and can also receive that. You'll be able to respond to me, and if it's a specific question for Michelle, I will then forward it to her. Other than that, or if Michelle, if you have some contact information, but I'm happy to also share that on your behalf as well.
That sounds good. Thank you very much for having me today.